Police officers, what is your craziest suspect story? Story number 1. As an officer for 15 years, I've seen some bizarre situations unfold. But one particular incident still stands out as the most unforgettable. It all began on a seemingly normal day, 2019, when I was on patrol with my partner, Officer Ramirez. We were chatting about our weekend plans when a call came through on the radio, a possible break-in at a nearby animal shelter. We arrived at the scene, and from the outside, everything seemed calm. The shelter owner, an elderly woman named Mrs. Johnson, greeted us nervously. She explained that she had received a call from the alarm company, notifying her of suspicious activity inside the facility. Miss Johnson had rushed over and discovered the front door ajar. We cautiously entered the building, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. The air was thick with the smell of wet fur and animal waste. As we made our way through the dimly lit hallways, we noticed severely empty cages. There were several of them. The shelter, which was supposed to be housing dozens of dogs and cats, was eerily quiet. We began to suspect that something more sinister was at play. That's when we heard it. The sound of a muffled laughter coming from one of the back rooms. So, we crept towards the noise of our hearts pounding in our chest as we turned the corner. We were met with a sight that would haunt us for the rest of our careers. There, in the middle of the room, was a man dressed head to toe in a dog costume. He was frantically attempting to corral a group of animals, all of whom were wearing tiny police uniforms. The man, who we later identified as our suspect, had somehow managed to break into the shelter, steal several uniforms from a nearby police station, and dress up all the animals. We stood there in disbelief, unsure of how to proceed. The suspect, noticing us there, took off running towards the back exits, leaving a trail of confusion and terrified animals in his wake. We chased after him, but not before taking a moment to free the animals from their makeshift costumes. The pursuit led us through the streets of our small town, with the suspect still clad in his dog costume. As we sprinted past the bewildered onlookers, I couldn't help but think about how absurd the situation had become. Our foot chase finally ended when the suspect tripped. He decided he wanted to fall over his furry tail, allowing us to apprehend him without any further incident. Well, back at the station, we attempted to question our suspect, who he had come to refer to as Dog Man. He remained uncooperative, answering our questions with barks, growls. We were baffled by his behavior, and without any leads, the investigation stalled. A few days later, a local news outlet called wind of our story and dubbed it, and I quote, "The Great Animal Shelter Heist." The absurdity of the situation garnered national attention when it went viral from CCTV footage. And within hours, our small police department was flooded with phone calls from people offering tips and information. That's when we received a call from a woman who identified herself as the suspect's ex-girlfriend. She explained that the man had a history of mental health issues and had become obsessed with the idea of liberating animals from the shelter. He believed that by dressing the animals in these police uniforms, he was empowering them to fight against their human captors. With this information, we were finally able to unravel the mystery behind the Dog Man heist. After a thorough investigation and consultation with, mental health professionals, our suspect was deemed unfit to stand trial and was committed to a psychiatric facility. Years have passed since that bizarre incident, but it does remain one of the most unforgettable cases I've ever worked on. Every now and then, my colleagues and I still joke about the time we chased a man in a dog costume through the streets. I guess you could say, in hindsight, it's amusing to think about the absurdity of the situation, but it also serves as a reminder of the importance of mental health awareness and the need for proper resources to address the issues within our communities. Story number 2. Hey guys, In my 10 years as a police officer, there's one suspect, that still sends shivers down my spine. It was a rainy day in 2017, and I was on patrol with my partner. We were called to respond to a home invasion in progress at an isolated farmhouse on the outskirts of town. I knew it well. Upon our arrival, we noticed that the front door had been forced open. We cautiously enter with our weapons drawn and announced that we were here. The house, it was so quiet, save for the soft patter of raindrops against the windows. As we slowly made our way through the darkened hallways, we felt an overwhelming sense of dread. Suddenly, we heard a blood-curdling scream from upstairs. We rushed to the source, our adrenaline pumping. In one of the bedrooms, we found a terrified young woman, bound and gagged. We quickly untied her, and she explained through tears that a masked man broken in and was still inside here. Our hearts were racing as we continued our search, knowing that a dangerous and unpredictable suspect was just lurking somewhere in the shadows. As we approached the basement door, we heard shuffling sounds from below. We knew it was his feet, so we descended the creaky steps, our flashlights casting an eerie glow on the damp concrete walls. We were met with a horrifying sight. A makeshift torture chamber, complete with blood-stained tools and restraints. The room, it smelled of decay, and we knew we had stumbled upon something truly sinister. That's when we saw him, the masked suspect, brandishing a knife and standing in the darkest corner of the room, his eyes glinted with a chilling mix of malice and insanity. He lunged at us, and a fierce, struggle ensued. It was dark. We fought to disarm him, but all the while knowing that one wrong move could be fatal. Eventually, we did overpower him in the darkness and managed to get the handcuffs on him, but not before sustaining several injuries ourselves. With the suspect in custody, we continued to investigate the basement, uncovering the remains of several missing people. It became clear that we had apprehended a sadistic killer who had been preying on innocent victims for months. The town had been plagued by unsolved disappearances, and we were finally able to connect the dots. The case received widespread media attention, and our small community was both horrified and relieved to learn of the killer's arrest. The young woman that we saved that night, Emily. Emily was the sole survivor of the suspect's twisted crimes. She showed immense courage in the face of unspeakable horror, and was instrumental in helping us build a case against her captor. As for the serial killer, he was ultimately convicted on multiple counts of murder, kidnapping, and assault. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring that he would never again harm another innocent soul. This case still haunts me to this day. I'll never forget it, serving as a stark reminder of the evil that lurks. But it also reinforces the importance of our work as police officers, and our duty to protect and serve. Even in the face of unimaginable darkness, literally speaking, the terror of the night will remain in my favor forever, as will the memory of Emily's bravery and the knowledge that our actions prevented further tragedies. Story number 3. Detective story. During my 20-year career as a detective, one case remains attached in my mind as the most chilling and unnerving of everything. It was a foggy December evening, 2011, I can never forget, when I received a call from my supervisor, Captain Reynolds. A body had been discovered in an abandoned warehouse in the city's outskirts, and I was the head of the investigation for it. Upon arriving at the scene, I was met by the forensic team who had been combing the areas for clues for hours. The victim, a young man in his early 20s, had been brutally murdered. His body was found from the ceiling bound, limbs contorted in very unnatural positions. The killer left a note pinned to the victim's chest which read, and I quote, "This is only the beginning." Over the following weeks, more bodies began turning up across the city. Each victim was found in a similar state, brutally murdered, limbs contorted, with the same chilling message left behind. It became clear that we were dealing with a sadistic serial killer who took pleasure in terrorizing our city. The press even dubbed the killer the Puppeteer. Go ahead, Google. And fear gripped our community as lead detective. I was under immense pressure to solve the case and apprehend him. My team and I worked tirelessly, following leads, interviewing witnesses, and even analyzing forensic evidence for hours. But the Puppeteer just seemed to be one step ahead, always taunting us with his twisted, clueless, and gruesome handiwork. That's when we received what they call a break in the case. A witness came forward claiming to have seen a suspicious person leaving one of the crime scenes. The witness provided a detailed description, and we were able to create a composite sketch. We released the sketch to the public, hoping somebody would recognize the suspect. Days later, we received an anonymous tip. The caller claimed to know the Puppeteer's identity, stating that he was a reclusive artist who lived alone in a remote cabin somewhere down in the woods. So my team and I immediately set out to investigate, and as we approached many cabins, specifically one cabin in general, a sense of foreboding washed upon us. The air was thick with tension, you could taste it, and the eerie silence was deafening. We found the front of the door unlocked and cautiously entered, unsure of what terrors we'd find inside. The cabin, it was dark and filled with the stench of decay. As our flashlights looked everywhere amongst the walls, we realized that we were covered in disturbing paintings depicting scenes of torture and death. The artwork, if you call it that, sent chills down our spine, and we knew we had found our killer. We continued our search and, well, in the basement we discovered a grisly scene. There, hanging from the rafters, were the lifeless bodies of several victims, arranged like twisted marionettes. We were horrified by the sight, but there was no sign of the Puppeteer. As we moved to secure the cabin, we heard the sound of footsteps above us. We rushed upstairs, weapons drawn, and we found him. The Puppeteer standing in the living room. He was clad in black, his face hidden behind a sinister mask. Without hesitation, he went for us. He had a knife. A brutal struggle happened, and during which one of the fellow officers was grievously injured. We managed to subdue and arrest the killer without even taking his life, but the cost was high. Back at the station, we unmasked the Puppeteer, revealing a seemingly ordinary man with a chillingly calm demeanor. During interrogation, though, he was different. He showed absolutely nothing. No remorse for his crimes, for his victims. Only a twisted satisfaction in the fear and suffering he had inflicted on his people. The victims. The Puppeteer was eventually convicted on multiple counts of murder, sentenced to life in prison without any possibility of parole. The case even received national attention, and our city breathed a collective sigh of relief, knowing that a sadistic killer was finally where he belonged, behind iron bars. Unfortunately, the families of the victims found, well, some semblance of closure, though the wounds left by the Puppeteer's heinous acts would never fully heal. In the months following the trial, I found myself haunted by the memories of the case. The gruesome crime scenes and the chilling calm of the Puppeteer weighed heavily on my mind. I sought therapy to cope with the lingering trauma and just began to focus on rebuilding my life. But guys, you would think it ends there, but no. The story keeps on going. 2 years after the Puppeteer's conviction, I received a letter. The handwriting was eerily familiar, and as I read the words, a cold sweat broke on my brow. The letter was from the Puppeteer. It contained a cryptic message, and I quote, "The strings have not been cut. The show goes on." The implications of the letter was terrifying. Had the Puppeteer orchestrated a network of accomplices from behind bar? Were there others out there willing to carry out his gruesome legacy? My superiors dismissed the letter as an attempt by the killer, or maybe somebody else, just to maintain control and instill fear from his prison cell. However, I simply could not shake the feeling that there was more to it. Determined to uncover the truth, I delved back into the case and began to search for any overlooked connections or patterns. I became obsessed with the idea that there was more to the puppeteer's twisted web of lies than we had originally uncovered. See, as I dug deeper, I received more letters, each more cryptic and menacing than the last. I knew I was getting close to the truth, but the investigation took a toll on my personal life and definitely my mental health. My marriage fell to shambles, and I became increasingly isolated as I pursued the shadows of the puppeteer. Finally, after years of tireless searching, I discovered a hidden network of individuals who had been in contact with the puppeteer. They were scattered across the country. They shared the same twisted fascination with his crime and a desire to carry on his gruesome work. Working with federal authorities, we managed to apprehend and dismantle this network of would-be killers, preventing them from continuing the puppeteer's reign of terror. It was a small victory in the face of immense darkness, but it provided a sense of closure that had long eluded me. Now, as I recount this entire event, I am reminded of the evil that can lurk in the most unsuspecting places, and the importance of remaining vigilant in the face of darkness. The puppeteer, yeah, he may be behind bars, but the scars he left in our city and the lives he destroyed will never be forgotten.